The Seattle rain had finally stopped, leaving behind that familiar petrichor scent I'd grown to love. Through my apartment window, I could see the Space Needle piercing through the clearing mist, its silhouette a constant reminder of why I chose this city. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the cursor blinking on my latest UX design project when the LinkedIn notification popped up. Jake Mitchell, my nephew's name, jumped out at me from the screen. My heart did a small flip as I clicked open his message. "Hey, Aunt Sarah, I got the internship at Cascade Tech. Would it be okay if I stayed with you this summer?" I stared at those words, my throat suddenly dry. The last time I'd seen Jake was at his high school graduation 4 years ago, a gangly teenager with braces and acne. Now his LinkedIn profile showed a completely different person, confident smile, sharp jawline, and eyes that seemed to hold secrets. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed my response. "Congratulations. Of course you can stay. When do you arrive?" The reply came almost instantly, "Next week." "Thanks, you're the best." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, my heart racing inexplicably. The spring breeze drifted through my open window, carrying the scent of blooming cherry blossoms from the street below. My Queen and apartment suddenly felt smaller, more intimate. I got up and walked to the guest room, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors. The room was pristine, untouched since my divorce 2 years ago. Tom had never understood my dedication to my career, my need to prove myself in the tech world. Now, standing in the doorway, I wondered what it would be like to have another presence in my carefully ordered space. The week flew by in a blur of Zoom meetings and deadline pressures. Before I knew it, I was standing at SeaTac Airport, scanning the arrival board. That's when I saw him. Jake had grown into his height, his Stanford hoodie doing little to hide his athletic build. He spotted me and broke into a wide smile that made my stomach flutter. "Aunt Sarah." His hug was unexpected, warm, and somehow different from any family embrace I'd known. I caught a whiff of his cologne, something woodsy and masculine that made my head spin slightly. The drive home was filled with his animated chatter about his final year at Stanford, his hopes for the internship, his dreams of launching a startup. I found myself stealing glances at his profile as he spoke, noticing how his hands moved expressively, how his eyes lit up with passion. Seattle's skyline glittered before us as we crossed the bridge, the setting sun painting everything in shades of gold. "This view never gets old," he said, turning to catch my eye. Something in his gaze made me grip the steering wheel tighter. The elevator ride to my apartment was silent, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. Jake stood close, too close, our shoulders almost touching in the confined pace. I could feel the heat radiating from his body. 15 floors had never felt so long. "This is amazing," he breathed as we entered the apartment, dropping his bags by the door. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting dancing shadows across his face. I watched as he explored the space, his presence somehow making everything feel different, alive. "The guest room is down the hall," I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. That night, I lay awake in bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person moving through my home. The shower running. Footsteps in the hallway. The soft click of a door. My body hummed with an awareness I didn't want to acknowledge. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows. I found Jake in the kitchen, shirtless, making coffee. The sight stopped me in my tracks. "Morning," he said, turning to face me with 2 mugs in hand. Droplets of water from his shower still clung to his shoulders. I forced myself to look away, mumbling something about being late for work. The Zoom meeting that afternoon changed everything. I was in the middle of presenting my latest design when Jake walked past my home office, unaware he was in frame. The chat exploded with questions. "Who's the hottie, Sarah? Didn't know you were dating someone. Girl, details please." My cheeks burned as I tried to steer the conversation back to the project. But the damage was done. By evening, my Slack was buzzing with private messages. I sat on my balcony, glass of wine in hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Jake joined me, settling into the chair next to mine. "Sorry about the meeting," he said softly. "It's fine," I replied, but my voice caught slightly. His knee brushed against mine as he reached for my wine glass, taking a sip from the same spot my lips had been. The gesture felt oddly intimate. We sat in silence, watching darkness creep over the city. Street lights flickered to life below us, like earthbound stars. "You know," he said finally, "I had the biggest crush on you when I was younger." My heart stopped. "Jake." I know. I was just a kid then." The way he emphasized then made my pulse quicken. The weekend brought a heat wave that seemed to settle over Seattle like a heavy blanket. I found myself hyper-aware of Jake's presence in my space. The way he moved. The sound of his voice. The lingering looks that seemed to last a heartbeat too long. We decided to escape the heat by visiting Pike Place Market. The market was alive with energy, vendors calling out, fish flying through the air, tourists snapping photos. Jake's hand found the small of my back as he guided me through the crowds. Each touch sent electricity through my body. "Sarah? Is that you?" My blood ran cold as I heard Mark's voice, my colleague from the UX team. He approached us, eyes darting between jaw. "Ko and me," a knowing smile playing on his lips. "Didn't know you were seeing someone," he said, his tone suggestive. "This is my nephew, Jake," I said quickly, the word nephew tasting bitter on my tongue. Mark's eyebrows shot up, and I could practically see the office gossip forming in his mind. That evening, I found myself scrolling through Jake's Instagram. Photos of him rock climbing, surfing, laughing with friends. His latest post was from earlier that day, a selfie of us at the market, Seattle's famous sign in the background. The caption read, "Best summer already." My finger hovered over the like button before I closed the app, feeling like a teenager with a crush. The days began to blur together, each one charged with unspoken tension. Mornings of casual touches in the kitchen. Evenings of shared takeout and Netflix, sitting closer than we should. Late nights on the balcony, conversations that danced around the edge of something dangerous. I told myself it was nothing. That I was imagining the way his eyes followed me. The way he found excuses to be near me. The way my body responded to his presence. But then came the night of the thunderstorm. Lightning split the sky, illuminating my bedroom in harsh flashes. I couldn't sleep, the thunder matching the tumult in my mind. A soft knock at my door made my heart race. "Sarah?" Jake's voice was barely a whisper. I sat up, sheets pulling around my waist. "Everything okay?" He stepped into my room, closing the door behind him. Lightning flashed again, highlighting the contours of his face. I couldn't sleep, he said, moving closer. The mattress dipped as he sat on the edge of my bed. Thunder rolled overhead, and I felt myself trembling. Not from the storm. From his proximity. From the way his hand found mine in the darkness. From the electricity that crackled between us, more powerful than the lightning outside. We shouldn't, I whispered, but I didn't pull away. His fingers intertwined with mine, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. I know, he replied, his voice husky. Another flash of lightning. His face was inches from mine. I could feel his breath on my lips. The thunder crashed, and with it, my last shred of resistance. His lips met mine in the darkness, soft at first, then hungry with need. Everything I'd been holding back rushed forward like a breaking dam. My hands found his hair, pulling him closer as the storm raged outside. His body pressed against mine, solid and warm in the darkness. We have to stop, I gasped, even as my body arched into his touch. Lightning illuminated his face, his eyes dark with desire, his expression torn between want and hesitation. Thunder rolled again, and he pulled back slightly, his breathing ragged. You're right, he whispered, but his hands still rested on my waist. The storm continued to rage outside, matching the tempest in my chest. We sat there in the darkness, neither moving, aware of the line we'd nearly crossed. Finally, Jake stood, his silhouette outlined by another flash of lightning. Good night, Sarah, he said softly, before disappearing into the hallway. I lay awake until dawn, my lips still tingling from his kiss. The next morning brought sunshine and crushing guilt. I left for work early, avoiding the kitchen and our usual coffee routine. The Cascade Tech office buzzed with energy, but I couldn't focus. My phone lit up with a text from Jake, "We should talk about last night." I stared at those words until they blurred. The annual Seattle Summer Music Festival was that weekend, an event I usually skipped. But Jake had 2 tickets, and I found myself agreeing to go. The evening air was warm, filled with the sound of music and laughter. Jake wore a black t-shirt that made him look older, more dangerous. We moved through the crowd, his hand occasionally brushing mine. Each touch sent sparks through my body. The band played something slow and sultry as the sun set. Jake handed me a drink, his fingers lingering against mine. "Dance with me," he said, his voice low and persuasive. I knew I should say no. But the music pulsed through my veins like liquid courage. His hands found my hips as we swayed to the rhythm. The crowd pressed us closer together. I could feel every breath, every heartbeat. "Sarah," he murmured against my ear, sending shivers down my spine. That's when I saw the flash of a phone camera. My colleague Amy stood nearby, her expression a mixture of shock and scandal. I pulled away from Jake as if burned. "We need to leave," I said, my voice shaking. The drive home was silent, heavy with unspoken words. Seattle's lights blurred past my window, a kaleidoscope of color and regret. Back in my apartment, Jake followed me to the balcony. The city spread out below us, oblivious to our turmoil. "I'm not sorry," he said finally, breaking the silence. I gripped the railing until my knuckles turned white. "You should be. This is wrong. Is it? Or are we just afraid?" His words hung in the air between us. I turned to face him, ready to argue, to be rational. But the look in his eyes stopped me. Pure, unguarded want. He stepped closer, backing me against the railing. "Tell me you don't feel this too," he whispered. My heart thundered in my chest. The city lights reflected in his eyes, making them sparkle with intensity. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing across my bottom lip. I knew I should stop him. Push him away. Remember who we were. Instead, I kissed him. This time there was no storm to blame. No darkness to hide behind. Just us, illuminated by the Seattle skyline. His hands tangled in my hair as he deepened the kiss. My body melted into his, every point of contact burning like fire. A door slammed somewhere in the building, breaking the spell. I pushed him away, reality crashing back like a cold wave. "This can't happen again," I say. My voice trembling. Jake ran a hand through his disheveled hair, frustration evident in every movement. "Why not? We're both adults. You're my nephew. By marriage. And Tom's not even in the picture anymore." His logic made dangerous sense. I turned away, unable to look at him. "Go to bed, Jake." I heard him sigh, then his footsteps retreating. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Amy's photos from the festival had made their way through the office grapevine. Slack messages piled up, full of questions and innuendos. I sat at my kitchen island, staring at my laptop screen in horror. Jake appeared behind me, reading over my shoulder. His hand rested on my back, warm and steady. "It's going to be okay," he said softly. But we both knew it wasn't. The weekend stretched ahead of us, long and dangerous. Every moment in the apartment felt charged with possibility. Every accidental touch sparked with potential. We tried to maintain distance, to be normal. But normalcy had shattered like glass the night of the storm. Sunday afternoon found us in Pike Place Market again. The familiar chaos should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like every eye was on us. Every stranger's glance seemed knowing, judgmental. Jake stayed close, protective. His presence both soothing and maddening. We stopped at the flower market, surrounded by riots of color. "These remind me of you," he said, touching a deep red rose. "Beautiful but dangerous." I turned away, pretending not to hear. But his words echoed in my mind, persistent as a heartbeat. Back home, the sunset painted my apartment in shades of gold. Jake stood at the window, his profile sharp against the fading light. "I'm not going to apologize for how I feel," he said quietly. I moved to stand beside him, our reflections ghostly in the glass. "We can't do this." "Can't? Or won't?" His question hung in the air between us. Outside, Seattle continued its endless dance of light and shadow. Inside, we stood on the edge of something that could destroy us both. Or set us free. The choice was mine, and I had never been more afraid. Monday morning arrived with a summons to HR. My hands shook as I rode the elevator to the 14th floor. The photos from the festival had made their rounds. Susan, the HR director, sat behind her desk with a carefully neutral expression. "Sarah, we need to discuss some concerns that have been raised." I felt my career crumbling around me like sand. But somehow, I kept my voice steady as I explained that Jake was family. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. That evening, I came home to find Jake cooking dinner. The apartment smelled of garlic and herbs. He looked up as I entered, his eyes searching my face. How bad was it? I dropped my bag and kicked off my heels. They're watching us now. He moved closer, reaching for me. I stepped back, maintaining distance. We can't, Jake. Not anymore. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. We ate dinner in silence, the city lights twinkling mockingly outside. Days passed in a careful dance of avoidance. Brief conversations. Minimal eye contact. But the tension remained, thick as summer heat. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office. Jake spent more time at his internship, making a name for himself at Cascade Tech. We became experts at occupying the same space without touching. Until the 4th of July. The family barbecue was my brother's idea. Come on, Sarah. Bring Jake. Everyone wants to see him. I couldn't think of a reasonable excuse to refuse. The drive to my brother's suburban home felt endless. Jake sat beside me, window down, wind ruffling his hair. The scent of his cologne filled the car, making my head spin. The backyard was already full when we arrived. Children running with sparklers. Adults clustered around the grill. My sister-in-law hugged me tight. You look stressed, she whispered. If she only knew. Jake charmed everyone, as usual. He played with the kids, helped with the food. I watched him from across the yard, my heart aching. Then Tom showed up. My ex-husband stood in the gateway, uninvited but somehow expected. Sarah, he said, moving toward me. I felt Jake tense beside me before I even realized he was there. Tom's eyes flickered between us, narrowing slightly. Didn't expect to see you here, Jake. I'm staying with Sarah for the summer. The way Jake said my name made Tom's eyebrows rise. The air crackled with unspoken accusations. Fireworks began to explode overhead, but the real explosion was brewing below. Tom pulled me aside, his voice low and angry. Are you sleeping with him? He's my nephew, I hissed back. That's not a no. I pulled away from his grip, feeling sick. Across the yard, Jake watched us, his expression dark. The fireworks continued, painting the sky in brilliant colors. But all I could see was the way Jake's hands clenched at his sides. The way Tom's accusation hung in the air like smoke. The drive home was silent again, but different this time. Charged with something dangerous. As soon as we entered the apartment, Jake turned to me. What did Tom say to you? His voice was tight with controlled anger. Nothing that matters. It matters to me. He stepped closer, backing me against the wall. Everything about you matters to me. My heart raced as he leaned in. Jake, please. But I didn't know if I was begging him to stop or continue. His lips found mine, desperate and demanding. This kiss was different from the others. Raw. Possessive. My hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. All the careful distance we'd maintained shattered. His body pressed against mine, solid and warm. Tell me to stop, he breathed against my neck. I should have. Everything in me knew I should have. Instead, I pulled him closer. Let his hands wander. Let myself get lost in the heat of his touch. The city lights witnessed our surrender. Seattle's endless summer night wrapped around us like a blanket. We crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Drew maps on each other's skin with desperate fingers. And when morning came, bringing reality with its harsh light, I knew everything had changed. The annual tech conference was approaching fast. Jake was chosen to speak as the intern representative. I sat in the audience, my heart in my throat. He commanded the stage with natural confidence. His presentation was flawless, innovative. But all I could see was the way his hands had traced my skin. All I could hear was his whispered confessions in the dark. Afterward, in the empty conference room, he found me gathering my things. Sarah. The door clicked shut behind him. We stood there, the air heavy with possibility. Someone could come in, I whispered. He moved closer anyway. I don't care anymore. Neither did I. That's what scared me most. But fate had other plans. A phone buzzed, mine. The San Francisco office was offering me a promotion. Lead UX designer for their flagship project. The catch? I had to start in 2 weeks. I stared at the email, my vision blurring. Jake read it over my shoulder, his breath warm against my neck. Take it, he said softly. I turned to face him, searching his eyes. What about us? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The summer was ending anyway. His internship was almost over. Reality was catching up to our stolen moments. That night, we sat on the balcony one last time. The Seattle summer was fading, bringing cooler nights. Jake's hand found mine in the darkness. I got an offer too, he said quietly. Silicon Valley startup. They want me to lead their dev team. My heart skipped a beat. San Francisco. Where I was going. Jake. I know. We can't. His thumb traced circles on my palm. The city lights blurred through my tears. We spent our last week together in a haze of desperate touches. Memorizing each other. Knowing it had to end. The morning I left for San Francisco, Jake drove me to the airport. We stood at security, neither wanting to say
goodbye.
This isn't the end, he whispered, pulling me close. But we both knew it was. Had to be. One last kiss, hidden behind a pillar. One last touch. One last look. Then I walked away, not daring to look back. San Francisco welcomed me with fog and new beginnings. My apartment overlooked the Bay Bridge. Different city. Different lights. Same emptiness. Months passed. Seasons changed. I threw myself into work. Tried to forget the taste of forbidden kisses. The heat of taboo touches. Jake's startup took off. I saw him sometimes on tech news websites. His success celebrated in Silicon Valley. His Instagram showed a life well lived. But his eyes looked different now. Harder. Like mine. Winter came to San Francisco, bringing rain instead of snow. I sat in my office late one night, watching the fog roll in. A notification lit up my phone. Jake had posted a photo at Cary Park in Seattle. Our old view. The caption read, "Some places hold memories we can never forget." My finger hovered over the like button. This time, I pressed it. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. A direct message from Jake. "I miss our summer." 3 words that shattered my carefully rebuilt walls. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. Remembered stolen kisses in thunderstorms. Desperate touches in the Seattle night. The way he'd looked at me like I was everything. My fingers moved across the screen before I could stop them. "I miss you too." The typing bubbles appeared immediately. "I'm in San Francisco next week." My heart stopped. Started again. Raced. "Jake. Just coffee. Please." I knew I should say no. Knew this was dangerous. But the heart doesn't learn. Or maybe it doesn't want to. Okay. 1 word. 1,000 possibilities. The fog continued to roll in outside my window, wrapping the city in its mysterious embrace. Hiding secrets. Creating new ones. And somewhere in Seattle, Jake looked at the same stars. Remembering the same summer. Waiting for next week. For coffee. For us. Some stories don't end. They just pause. Waiting for the next chapter. Like the Seattle rain. Like forbidden love. Like us. End.